Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Sirhan on X, live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States of America. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful 9th of June 2025 and a wonderful 3-day weekend before it. Usually for stuff like this, I have a one-topic show. I will touch on it here in a second. But I see some newbies out here. Just touch on this real quick on what I do. People have been asking me if I want to do a talk show. Well, you guys asked for it. I did it. So here I am. I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. What I do is I touch on a bunch of sports topics from the past to the present, correlate the two to help people for the future when it comes to the world of sports. Some sports, especially like the one I'm going to talk about tonight, has a topic that deserves its own show and its own distinction. And that's what we're going to do tonight. And this is a special moment, especially in the world of boxing, because it touched off one of the all-time great runs in heavyweight championship boxing history. This took place 47 years ago today at the Sports Pavilion at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas, Nevada. It was the battle for the heavyweight championship between champion Ken Norton and the challenger, number one contender, Larry Holmes. How do we get to this point? Well, the fascinating thing is few people any know that Ken Norton was actually a heavyweight champion. Now, how did he become the heavyweight champion? He didn't win it into the ring. He won a title eliminator over Jimmy Young in 1977, which was prior to Leon Spinks shocking Muhammad Ali to win the heavyweight title. And since Spinks chose to go for the rematch with Ali instead of Ken Norton, the governing body stripped. I would say they stripped him, but because he refused it, Norton was basically granted the championship by virtual default because Norton won the title eliminator over Jimmy Young. And Ken Norton, of course, had a lot of memorable battles himself, including the 3 with Muhammad Ali. Some people would say he legitimately won the 3rd fight. He was victimized by the boxing intelligentsia when they fought in San Diego. Ken Norton, one of the premier physiques to ever lace up the gloves and step in a boxing ring. And anybody knows you don't customize physiques when it comes to boxers because some of them are not really the most well-sculpted individuals. I mean, some of the all-time greats may be chiseled out of stone because they have to lose weight to make weight or whatever. But we talk about actual physique, like actual Herculean type physique for his time. Nobody had it like Ken Norton. I mean, he fought them all. Jerry Quarry, the 3 with Ali, of course, obliterated by George Foreman in 1974. But then again, everybody got obliterated by George Foreman before he lost to Muhammad Ali. So we talk about the run of Ken Norton, a terrific fighter, known for the standout cross-arm defense, who basically uses trapezoids to help block punches and basically get inside and bob and weave, sort of like the old school days, even before him. Going back to standouts like even a George Benton. So Ken Norton going into this fight was the heavyweight champion. And basically in this fight, he basically challenges Larry Holmes, who after all of this took place, fought a title eliminator against Ernie Shavers in the first of their 2 fights, wins this one by a technical knockout, and is declared the number one contender for the title that was held by Ken Norton. Touch on this real quick. And known as a sparring partner for the longest time for Muhammad Ali, worked so hard to get to this point. We consider he was 26-0 going into the Shavers fight, and the winner of that fight was going to be the mandatory challenger. Turned out Larry Holmes won that one on a unanimous decision, going away, putting on a clinic when it comes to the use of his bread and butter, the left jab. Basically, this fight, after the evolution of the governing body started to split their ways. Basically, you could say it started with this. What happened with this was when Norton became the champ and Holmes was the challenger. While this was going on, Leon Spinks and Muhammad Ali were preparing for the lineal heavyweight championship. But it does not deter the fact that Larry Holmes and Ken Norton were two of the premier heavyweights of probably the golden era of the heavyweight division, which was the 1970s. Of course, before that, we talk about the big three, Ali, Frazier, and Foreman. Ali began his decline. Frazier was basically on his way out, and Foreman had the 10-year hiatus after he lost to Jimmy Young. And basically, it was the win by Jimmy Young over George Foreman that set up the fight with Ken Norton, and the winner of that one was going to be the mandatory challenger for the Spinks-Ali winner. But since Spinks opted to give Ali the rematch versus Ken Norton, the governing body rewarded Ken Norton with the championship. Odd puzzle, odd circumstances, but that's how it is. Now, we talk about Larry Holmes, one of the more cerebral fighters maybe ever, known for the longest time as Muhammad Ali's sparring partner, worked hard to get to this point, had a more of a blue-collar approach that basically almost rubbed off the boxing intelligentsia the wrong way, sort of a la, like later on, guys like Marvin Hagler and Julio Cesar Chavez and Pernell Whitaker, just to name a few. But we talk about Larry Holmes, the bread and butter will always be his left jab. I mean, of course, he sparred with the one of the greatest of them all, Muhammad Ali, with the left jab. How do you not spar with him and not know anything about the left jab? So Larry Holmes builds his record of 26-0 and is the number one contender for this particular fight. The fight basically built at Sportsman's Ball over at the Sports Pavilion of Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas 47 years ago today. Actually, 2 months before my birthday. And basically what we have here is a case of a fight where Larry Holmes and Ken Norton was guaranteed nearly $4 million, which today would be an insurmountable number, hard to think of. And Larry Holmes was guaranteed only $500,000. And we know that didn't sit well with him at that time. When you talk about this particular fight, few heavyweight title fights could match this one. We started off early on where basically Holmes controls the early rounds with his left jab, because we know that's been the Larry Holmes bread and butter, peppering Norton at times with the right cross, taking the early lead of this particular fight. And it looked like Larry Holmes was going to control this and go on his way to a decision or maybe a late stoppage, because those right hands of Larry Holmes were starting to do some damage to Ken Norton. As the fight was going on, what happened here was the sheer will and the sheer aggression of Ken Norton at times. He started to have success. And in the middle rounds, you started to see why this was an all-time great fight. Ken Norton wouldn't back down. He started to make his mark. And as he was trying to make his mark, Larry Holmes started to fade just a bit. Not a lot, just a bit. And as this fight was going on, Ken Norton was starting to pose himself using that cross-arm defense to get inside the reach of Larry Holmes, and that long left jab, which I said has been Larry Holmes' bread and butter through his long reign as the heavyweight champion, which I'll touch on at the end here in a second. And as the fight goes on, as the 8th and 9th rounds, the right hand of Ken Norton started to find its mark. And every time he started to hit Larry Holmes, you start to see Larry Holmes start to feel the right hand a little bit as those rounds were going on. Part of it was the fatigue of Holmes because Ken Norton was just coming on and on and on. And basically, at that point, in round 10, Holmes basically, as Norton was really coming on, looked like he was going to wind up losing the heavyweight title fight simply because he started to look real tired, offering little to nothing, and Ken Norton was starting to come on. I mean, Ken Norton with that cross-arm defense and his ability to come forward with the overhand right out of the cross-arm stance was one of his bread and butters throughout his tenure and his career. And it was starting to find its way home to Larry Holmes, to where you thought maybe Norton would probably get the premier win of his career, maybe his biggest win since he beat Ali the first time of their 3-fight trilogy. But as the 12th and 13th rounds started to come on, Larry Holmes started to find his second win. And it was the 13th round where Larry Holmes started a time Ken Norton coming in with the left jab and the right hand. And every time he started to pepper Ken Norton would start to feel the punch, feel the effects, and he started to wobble. And Larry Holmes really seized control of the 13th round, and it looked like he sapped all the momentum from Ken Norton. And basically, in a round where some people thought you could have scored that a 2-point round, even though there wasn't a knockdown, because in the final minute to minute and a half of that round, Larry Holmes started to beat up Ken Norton a little bit. And basically, at that point, you thought Larry Holmes was going to seize control of the heavyweight title and take it away from Ken Norton. In the 14th round, it flip-flops again. Ken Norton back to finding the home for the right hand, and now he's controlling the fight, and he has Holmes on the defensive throughout most of that round, simply because Larry Holmes started to feel the effects of what Ken Norton was doing. The 13th and 14th rounds probably one of the real 2-round flip-flops maybe in heavyweight title history, because it was the 13th round. It looked like Holmes was gaining control of the particular fight, and you go to the 14th round, Norton looks like he starts to find himself, and he finds a way to get to Larry Holmes. So we have the 14 rounds complete. Basically a terrific fight back and forth. Both fighters having their moments. Both fighters were hurt. Both fighters finding a home for right hands. But of course, a real story, which was revealed years later, was that Larry Holmes went into this fight with a pulled muscle in his left hand, which is key because we know the bread and butter of Larry Holmes was and always will be the left jab. So he basically went into the fight a one-arm fighter. So we conclude the 14 rounds of this fight. And before I divulge into the 15th round, I'll prepare this because this is the what Holmes-Norton was all about coming up. All three judges had this fight dead even going into the 15th round. All three had it 7 rounds Holmes, 7 rounds Norton. Whoever won this 15th round was going to win the World Heavyweight Championship. And boy, you can make a case for round 15 of this fight, maybe the greatest round in heavyweight championship boxing history. Of course, I'll talk about all of the all-time great overall rounds here in a minute. But I talk about heavyweight championship boxing history because of what was at stake and everything that was laid out. The perfect case of whoever won the round won the fight. This is why it was the greatest round ever. I'm about to talk about it. All three judges had it even. 7 rounds Holmes, 7 rounds Norton. And so what happens? We start the 15th round where at the first minute of the round, Ken Norton seizes control. Looks like he's going to control the fight and successfully defend the championship. But a subtle mistake and a counter right hand over the top by Larry Holmes. And now Ken Norton is the one hanging on, and Holmes is starting to tee off. And when it looks like Holmes is ready to control the round after that moment, Ken Norton comes back, Larry Holmes comes back, and now the last minute of round 15, we have exchanges by both standout all-time great heavyweights, just trading it off, and basically, it's basically the equivalent of Rock'em Sock'em Robots, because that was what round 15 of this fight was. Ken Norton had his moment, looked like he was going to control it. Larry Holmes comes back with the overhand right, looks like he was going to control it. Norton buckles down, then Holmes buckles down, then Norton buckles down, and then Holmes buckles down, and we have a Donnybrook in the 15th round. And basically, that was where the heavyweight championship was going to be decided. I mean, both guys had their moments. You thought Ken Norton was going to control it, and then you thought Larry Holmes might have been able to get a knockout because he had Ken Norton hurt when Holmes timed him with a perfectly right hand. And basically, at that point, you thought for a second Larry Holmes was going to control it. But you saw why in that 15th round, both all-time great heavyweights showed why they were deserving of this particular championship. And as I said, this fight was a case of both fighters pouring it all, giving it all, something we don't see in heavyweight championship boxing these days. And what happened as a result? We have the greatest heavyweight championship round ever, which is round 15 of Norton Holmes 47 years ago today. So it goes to the scorecards. And in this particular case, it was one judge that had it for Norton, One judge had it for Holmes, and the third judge also had it for Holmes. Your winner by a split decision, and the new heavyweight champion from Eastern Pennsylvania, the Eastern Assassin Larry Holmes, winning this fight by a 15-round split decision. We talk about Hagler Leonard being the most debated in boxing history when it comes to who won that fight. This one is not far behind it because everyone's debating who really won this fight, and there are people that still debate who won that awesome 15th round between these two fighters. Because this was a case of Larry Holmes having his moment, Ken Norton having his moment. They each had their moments back and forth all over the place. And I scored this fight many, many different ways. I mean, I can see arguments for both ways. Some people try to say Holmes won this one more one-sidedly than the judges had it. I don't know if I would go that far. I thought he did control the tempo early, especially with that left jab, keeping Norton at bay. But when Norton started to come on and he started to dictate the pace, there were times where Larry Holmes, even though he had his moments, Ken Norton decided to take control and look like he was going to be able to seize control of the fight. But as the rounds continued to progress, you saw both fighters buckle down and basically fight for the elite prize. And as round 13 came around, especially the second half where Larry Holmes really took control, you thought he was going to win that thing by knockout because he had Ken Norton hurt in the 13th round. You know, some people scored at a 10-8 round without a knockdown. After watching that, I could understand it. I scored a 10-9 for Holmes. It was a clear-cut Holmes round. It was a no-brainer because after the first two right hands that he buckled Ken Norton with, he controlled the round from that point forward. And the 14th round, it was a clear Norton round because he turned the momentum back to his favor. He started finding a home for his right hand, and he had Larry Holmes reeling. And, of course, the 15th round, the one that everybody talks about, the round that everybody debates, who won round 15 of Larry Holmes versus Ken Norton, it's always going to be up for debate. I mean, it's this one, the one that's split down the middle. 50% would say Norton, 50% would say Holmes. You know, Norton started out like he controlled it. Holmes came back, Norton and then Holmes, and they're going at it in that 15th round. And you're talking about one of the premier rounds in boxing history and definitely the greatest round in heavyweight championship boxing history. When you consider fighting for the heavyweight championship, needing to win the last round to win the fight, all three judges had it even going into that round. And what happened? Both guys just let it all hang out. I mean, it's always going to be debated who won that 15th round between Holmes and Norton. Always. I mean, it's probably more to that round is probably as debated as the entire decision of Leonard Hagler, April 6, 1987. It will always be in that category because that round was just terrific for both guys. And basically the legend of Larry Holmes began on that particular night. Now, we touched on many times the legacy of Larry Holmes. A little bit complex, but also simple, but it's weird to describe it. Probably, this, you put it in this sense, maybe came at the wrong era. Because you think about what happened with the 70s, with Ali, Frazier, Foreman, Norton, as they were controlling the particulars. Holmes comes on later on, and at that point, Frazier's on his way out. Ali's declining. Foreman, we know the 10-year hiatus. The only people left at the back end of the 70s were guys like Jimmy Young, Ernie Shavers, Ken Norton, and a couple of others. Even you throw a Jerry Quarry in there. But when you talk about the reign of Larry Holmes, if you can go 7.5 years and successfully make 20 successful title defenses of your heavyweight championship, you've done something right. A lot of people are going to nitpick his era. A lot of people are going to nitpick his resume because that's how the sport is. But maybe this is a case of where you have to give credit to longevity and quantity over quality, because who they put in front of Larry Holmes, he handled. I mean, he fought Norton. He beat him. He got the second fight with Shavers in the defense. Shavers worked himself up back to the number one contender spot. Holmes beat him. The fight in 82 against Jerry Cooney. Fights against guys like Tim Witherspoon and Carl Williams, just to name a couple of others. But the fact that he will be remembered more as post-Ali is something in his own way that sort of irks Larry Holmes. I mean, we've seen the press conferences. We've seen the interviews. I mean, the guy basically wants his credit. I mean, he basically earned it. And I've always said, the people that don't give this guy his due isn't really a fan of the sport. because Larry Holmes was just phenomenally phenomenal. I mean, he came after Ali and before the 90s got hot with guys like Evander Holyfield, Buster Douglas, Riddick Bowe, Justin Lennox Lewis, just to name a few. But Larry Holmes' run started 47 years ago today, and he had to go to the well with basically a one-armed fighter because he later revealed the pulled muscle in his left hand, which we know the left jab has always been the bread and butter for the Eastern assassin, Larry Holmes, and basically beat a tough, durable, all-time great heavyweight in Ken Norton. And Ken Norton's probably a top 25, top 30 all-time great heavyweight. That's saying a whole lot. I could probably nitpick it more for him. Some people put him higher, but again, as I said, I don't partake because I don't know the criteria. But Larry Holmes and Ken Norton put a hell of a fight. And basically, you talk about two of the all-time greats of the heavyweight division. And probably, we talk about the documentary that came out, Champions Forever. They're two of the top five. Who are the other three? Of course, Ali, Foreman, Frazier. Ken Norton, you could probably say his misfortune was not, coming in that era because he was a terrific fighter himself. He did beat Ali the first time. Some people thought in the third fight he should have been rewarded the decision. I tend to agree because I thought he outworked Ali and should have been rewarded the decision. Even the look on Ali's face when his name was announced the winner by the ring announcer and that night in 76 pretty much simplifies it. Solid wins, especially when he obliterated Jerry Quarry and got the decision over Jimmy Young to get to this point. A stellar career himself, just mixed in with the other heavyweights at the time with Ali, Foreman, Frazier, and Holmes, just to name several of the 70s. One of the terrific physiques for a heavyweight and for any boxer, because we don't think of muscle or muscle physique when it comes to boxing. Maybe like tight and chiseled with tight abs, largely because they have to make the weight skills. But we talk about Herculean physiques, like triathlete type physiques for a male athlete of that time. Nobody had it like Ken Norton. And basically, that was the jaw-dropping factor for him, and that was the wow factor he brought anytime you saw him. Of course, the athletic background. His son, Ken Norton Jr., spent time with the San Francisco 49ers and the Dallas Cowboys of the NFL. So athletics is in the blood of the Nortons, especially Ken Norton Sr. and Jr. A standout fighter was Ken Norton Sr. And to wrap it up with him, continue on longer than he should. Got obliterated after this particular fight, twice in the first round by Ernie Shavers. I think 2 fights after this. And of course, the capper in 81 when he got walked down by Jerry Cooney. And basically a last chance to fight a title eliminator because it was that fight that vaulted Cooney into the fight with Larry Holmes in 82, which I'm going to touch on later this week. But Ken Norton was just a terrific, terrific fighter himself. When you talk about the all-time great heavyweights of the 70s, he's certainly in the middle of that golden era. I mean, he certainly is. Phenomenal fighter, that cross-arm defense. Fighters try to emulate it in the way he did. I mean, the only one I can think of that did it well was the second incarnation of George Foreman when he came back. Of course, it helped that Foreman had the great Archie Moore as his trainer to teach him that method. But that cross-arm method was successful for Ken Norton during his run and was able to garner him some solid wins and some even the losses to Ali in the third fight and Larry Holmes got him a very sound and solid performer in a better than expected effort both times. You could argue he should have won both of those fights. I thought he was, I don't want to say robbed, I thought he should have gotten the decision in the third Ali fight, and the Holmes fight always going to be up for debate. Just as debatable as Leonard Hagler was Holmes-Norton 15 years ago. Now we talk about some of the all-time great heavyweight championship fights, or some of the bigger ones. None tops the Thrilla in Manila. We know this. October 1st, 1975 in the Philippines. The third encounter between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. For you American idiots out there, I'll say this again. Doesn't matter where the fight's taking place, as long as the big fight's taking place. Muhammad Ali's from Louisville, Kentucky. Joe Frazier, of course, born in South Carolina. Nobody knows that part. Moved to Philly. 2 Americans. Where do they fight? In the Philippines. Probably the biggest fight and the biggest event in boxing history. And basically, it was a fight to the finish because both guys toyed with death through that 14-round wild fight. We talk about the Thriller in Manila because both guys were gassed and had faces of grotesque masks after the 14th round. And it was a case of who stopped the fight first. Turned out Eddie Futch stopped it for Joe Frazier. That's an all-time great fight. Who could talk about? You want to talk about another all-time great fight? Their first fight, Ali Frazier won, dubbed as the fight of the century. Had the distinction forever. We talk about March 8, 1971. That fight took place back and forth, lots of momentum shifts. Looked like Ali had control. Frazier comes back. Ali re-seizes control. And of course, Frazier comes back. The capper there was the 15th round left hook that Frazier floored Ali to help Frazier successfully defend his heavyweight championship at the time. The third fight between Floyd Patterson and Ingmar Johansson, were especially the first round where both guys hit the floor. I mean, it was 3 knockdowns both ways. I mean, Patterson and Johansson, not known for their chins, and pretty much why. You hit both of them, they're on the canvas. That was the end of their great trilogy. Just a terrific fight there. A competitive heavyweight championship fight. Maybe if you want to go more modern, the Evander Holyfield Riddick Bowe trilogy, especially round 10 of the first fight, where it was almost like a duplicate of round 15 of Ken Norton, Larry Holmes. First half looked like Bowe was going to get a knockout, especially the uppercut that nearly lifted Holyfield off the canvas. Holyfield, the warrior that he is, comes back, has Bowe hurt, but the bell saved Riddick Bowe. But that trilogy, especially the first fight, lots of action both ways, terrific heavyweight championship fights. I can go on and on with many more of these. The first fight between Rocky Marciano and Jersey Joe Walcott, back and forth there. Looked like Walcott was about to seize control till that picture perfect right cross that turned Joe Walcott's face sideways by Marciano and put Walcott down for the count, and Marciano wins the heavyweight championship. Many, many others. But it was 47 years ago today at the indoor sports arena of Caesars Palace in Las Vegas. 2 standout heavyweights of the 70s, Ken Norton and Larry Holmes, brought us a doozy, and the perfect case of who wins the last round wins the fight. This was a poster child of it, and both fighters knew going into the last round they needed to win it to win the heavyweight championship. Started out as if Norton controlled it. Holmes comes back, and after that, both guys were just letting it all hang out. A terrific show between 2 standout all-time great heavyweights of the 70s. Now we conclude with this when it comes to Larry Holmes' legacy. You know, he says a lot of outlandish things. I get it. I don't necessarily agree with it, especially recently. I don't know what's on his mind, saying the things he said about George Foreman. I mean, I don't understand that myself. You know, but Larry Holmes was one of these blue-collar guys who felt like he was slighted by the intelligentsia for the longest time, largely because he came after the 70s started to wind down, especially you can call it after Ali. Of course, we know about that sad story that took place October 2, 1980, in a fight that had no business taking place, not to the fault of Larry Holmes. But that's going to be his legacy, and it seemed like it itches him. I don't want to say, maybe you can say it bothers him, especially for the things that say, that the stuff that he says, but still does not deter the fact 7.5 years, 20 successful title defenses, definitely a top 7 all-time great heavyweight. His place in history is secure, whether people like it or not. I know he rubbed the intelligentsia off the wrong way, especially when we talk about the comments he made about Rocky Marciano prior to the Michael Spinks fights, which I'm not sure he should have said it, but still doesn't deter the fact he is an all-time great, and his place in history is forever secure. And we touch on Ken Norton briefly, of course, the unfortunate passing not too long ago. But again, his legacy is with the rest of the 70s heavyweights. A terrific, terrific fighter himself. You know, thought he beat Ali the third time. Some say the second fight. I thought the second fight, that one could have gone either way. Also could argue this one could have gone either way. This decision of Holmes-Norton is just as debated as Leonard Hagler, especially when we talk about the 15th round, because that round, everyone debates who really won it, because it's a case of who won the round, won the fight. And what happened? You know, according to two of the three judges, they felt Holmes won it. One of the judges felt like Norton won it. That goes on both ways, and it's just always debated forever and ever and ever. That round is just as debated as Leonard Hagler's decision. That's to tell you how debated round 15 and how exciting round 15 of the Larry Holmes-Ken Norton fight of 47 years ago today was. I mean, if you guys have just 5 minutes to spare, pull it up on YouTube, the 15th round of that fight. Watch it because you'll enjoy it. And this was the best fighting, the best for the premier prize, the heavyweight championship of the world. And both guys wanted it more than anything else. Because it was Ken Norton starting to, you can say his downturn. And Larry Holmes was the come-up fighter because he was the younger of the two. And on that night, Larry Holmes dug deep to escape with a split decision win and the heavyweight championship and brought it to Eastern Pennsylvania. Just a terrific, terrific fight between two terrific heavyweights of the 70s. Of course, Holmes catapulted into the 80s. And we know the rest of the Holmes career. Lost the 2 fights to Michael Spinks. He had the comeback loss to Mike Tyson in a fight, which he said later on, if I had to do it all over again, I either would not have taken it or better prepared myself. But he did manage to come back after that loss, fight a couple of tune-up fights before maybe you could probably say his most gratifying and satisfying win, which took place February 8th, 1992, when he upset Ray Mercer as a 2.5-to-1 underdog at the Convention Center in Atlantic City on a worldwide pay-per-view audience. Because that night, when he beat Ray Mercer, basically reminded people just how terrifically great Larry Holmes was in his heyday. And it was basically a clinic of what he's been known for. The use of that left jab, the use of the ring IQ, and he basically took Ray Mercer to the cleaners and then some on that night, February 8th, 1992. It got him a title shot against Evander Holyfield 4 months later in a fight where he acquitted himself much better than anyone thought he would. Actually, I thought he won the last 3 rounds, and he had Holyfield hurt a couple times in the last couple rounds there, especially one of those right crosses that Holyfield ran into. I mean, he acquitted himself well in that fight. The problem was Holyfield won 7 of the first 8 rounds. That was where he lost the fight, but still did much, much better than anyone thought he would against the upstart Evander Holyfield. And 3 years later, fought Oliver McCall in his last title fight. And basically, as a result, even though he lost on a close decision, just like the Holyfield loss, acquitted himself well. If you have a jab like Larry Holmes, and Larry Holmes, you could argue the greatest jab in boxing history. If you had a jab like his, and you have a ring IQ like he has, you could go a long way, and that's what happened when Larry Holmes fought Muhammad Ali. Fought throughout his career, and when he beat Ken Norton. Just an all-time great fighter was Larry Holmes, career for the better half of 2 to 2.5 decades, and basically, that was all she wrote for Larry Holmes. Of course, the end was 2002 with a novelty fight against Butterbean, but that was just something different. But it was 47 years ago today at the indoor pavilion of Caesar's Palace. It was the start of the 7.5-year title reign of Larry Holmes when he beat the standout all-time great Ken Norton. Needed to have the all-time great 15th round in heavyweight championship boxing history to do it. When all 3 judges had to fight even going into that final round, and it was Larry Holmes who escaped. I encourage everyone to watch that 15th round of that fight because it was a thing of beauty all the way around. Both guys at the championship level performing as a championship level fighters. That's what both Holmes and Norton did on that night. And we're not going to have any heavyweight championship fights remotely close to that ever again. May God rest the soul of Ken Norton. Larry Holmes, please, I love the hell out of Larry Holmes, but tone down your comments on George Foreman because he just passed. Okay? I mean, I know you're still hurt that you never got a chance to fight Foreman and you never had the chance to cross paths with Foreman at one point. Actually, he had a fight scheduled in 97, but for whatever reason, it didn't come through. But sure, when it comes to George Foreman, you're still an all-time great. Don't just diminish yourself the way you did with those kind of comments, because we want to remember Larry Holmes as an all-time great heavyweight, and we all do. Just stay away from the comments regarding George Foreman, because Foreman just passed, and for you to say that after he passed doesn't look good on you. Just thought I'd get off my chest a little bit. But this will always be Larry Holmes Day for you. You know, you did it 47 years ago today, 7.5 years, 20 successful title defenses. Nobody in today's heavyweight run is going to come close to that. I mean, forget Joe Louis and his 12 years and 25 successful title defenses. That's untouchable. No one is going to touch that with a 25-mile long pole. No one's going today is going to get near what Larry Holmes did, and he deserves credit and respect. You're talking about an all-time criminally underrated all-time great. Shout out to Larry Holmes for a terrific fight 47 years ago today. Congratulations. It will forever be Larry Holmes Day. And that'll wrap up this edition of Sir Hunt on X. I will be back tomorrow night with a full slate again. Also, if you follow me on the X platform, I will be live to chat more NFL. But tonight, devoted to the great Larry Holmes and Ken Norton for a super fight that took place 47 years ago. If you missed any of the show, you can listen to it on the Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio app, as well as the Spotify app. And as always, make self-care your number one priority in life. Take care of yourself first before you take care of anything else. If you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else in life is going to matter. You take care of yourself first, the good things are going to come your way. Have a good night. Take care. God bless. And I'll see you in 24 hours.